So good evening, everyone. Actually, you did better than an undergraduate classroom. I'll try it one more time. Good evening, everyone. Excellent. I love energy, especially before an economics lesson. So it's great to have you all here. It's my pleasure to be here and to, if we could start the presentation, to begin to give you a bit of background for the conversations you're going to be having over the next few days. And this is really to give you some background on the economy in Canada and what are some of the opportunities we have. The good news is we have lots of opportunity to do better. The bad news is we're not doing as well as we should. But I want to share this with you as background and we'll move ahead from there. So I do head the Conference Board of Canada and I have the great pleasure of having a staff of about 220 people. 50 of them are economists. So at any one given point in time, I've got about 100 opinions on where the economy is going. But I'm going to share the sort of central ones with you. And hopefully you won't get to the end of the conversation wondering who referred you to me. But let me say that there is good news. The globe is back to growing again after a really bad recession in 2008. The early 2000s, particularly for this group, should have been a good time. How many of you enjoyed the first decade of the 2000s economically? It was slightly more muted than I expected, but it was a good time. The economy was growing. We're seeing the world economy picking up, but it's not blustery growth at this particular time. What we did see in the early 2000s is that we had one of the most unprecedented infrastructure developments in human history, China. And this chart just shows you just how impactful that was. This is 1 year's consumption of China in various metals. Notice that many of them, China alone consumed half of the total worldwide supply in many metals. What's really interesting about this chart, though, is you'll notice the oil consumption is down. It's not very high. It's rising rather quickly as the middle class buys more cars. If you want to see competition for cars in the largest world market for cars, go to China today. It's absolutely amazing. What we have been buoyed up over the last little while, and we've seen high growth this year, is the fact that consumer spending's there. If I were the government of Canada, I would all have you raise your right hands and apply a pat on your back. You've been spending well. Growth has been up this year. The only problem is we've been borrowing from the bank to do it. That's the bad news. And we are going to be seeing interest rates rise over the next little while. They're going to be going up continuously for some time going forward. So what's going to happen, of course, is the consumer is no longer going to be fueling the economy and fueling growth. What we see at the Conference Board is that going forward, and this is part of the subdued news, Canada will be growing. Our forecast is around 2% growth. 2%'s not a lot. It doesn't provide a lot of opportunity for the next generation. It doesn't fund all those social services that we all want to call on. So if we look at it, it's subdued growth. The opportunity here, though, is we have opportunity. I'll share some of that with you. So if we look at it overall, subdued, not going to be moving fast. What we need to do, and it's a message you'll hear from me as we go forward, is we need to up our ambition, look for that opportunity and drive forward. And I'll share with you a number of things that we can do. It is a strange time, though. I will say that the politics of the world right now are unusual. I'm trying to be diplomatic right now. How many of you feel that I was being diplomatic? Okay, that was good, see? I just wanted to be apolitical about it. But it is a little bit the tale of two cities. We're seeing all of this unfolding right now and seeing it all influence us. But there are 4 factors I want to go through very quickly to really give you a sense of what's going to impact the Canadian economy and what is the opportunity for Canada in all this. The first one is, of course, global markets. The second is technological innovation. You got a little bit of a flavor at the intro here. The third is environmental regulation and the transition to the low carbon economy. And finally, aging demographics are something we need to look at. So let me start with the global market story. And again, it's a good news, bad news story. Markets have moved to be from national to regional to global. Not all of them are global, but increasingly. The good news is that all of the globalization that we saw over the last number of decades has actually been the largest single force to move people out of poverty in the globe in world history. Globalization has been a massively positive force in this. It's also created opportunity across the board, but it has created unequal opportunity. In the populism we see today and the politics that are unusual is a product of that. What we see inside of our economies, it's particularly the developed ones, is that certain people and certain industries and certain regions have been left behind. And that is the roots of the populism that we're seeing today. But in general, globalization has increased the overall world economy. It's created opportunity, particularly those who are determined to take advantage of it. The challenges for us in Canada, and I'll start with those, are that in a global marketplace where competition is increasing, we are not doing terribly well. So if you take a look at the chart, what you see is the non-energy exports of Canada have stagnated at best. And again, that's being somewhat diplomatic. They've gone down. In addition, what we're finding in some of the larger markets we export to is that, for instance, in the goods market in the U.S., our share of the goods market in the U.S. has declined. I'm curious, how many of you knew that? Pretty shocking. The good news when you have 50 economists is you get to wander the halls every once in a while and go, I'd like that chart. Occasionally you wander down the hall going, oh, don't show me that again. This was one of those. We're losing share in the U.S., and even more shockingly, my friends, we are losing share in Asia. We are increasing our exports to Asia, but we're doing it at a rate that's slower than the growth in Asia. So we're actually losing market share. This is the negative news. The positive news is that you're all here, and your extended assignment is to turn this around. Is everybody clear? That's the professor in me. It's not a good news story. In the background, of course, we have the NAFTA conversations. But frankly, those aren't the biggest issue. The biggest issue for us is how do we take advantage of global markets? How do we get more than our fair share of global markets? I do a lot of work in some other countries. One of them is Denmark. The Danes see themselves as 5 million people against the world. We're 35 million people against the world, especially when you look at the fact that Greater Shanghai has the population of Canada, just to give you a reference. We need to be more competitive in world markets. We need to get out there. We need to export not only our raw materials, but also the services, the many different services I saw out there today. Will NAFTA, if it collapses, cause us major problems? Well, actually, in a lot of areas, not really. The rates at which we'll be charged will go up, but many of them are very small percentages. So what's the message from the first of the forces here? We need to grow our market share worldwide. We need to diversify our markets. We cannot be as dependent on the U.S. market. We've been talking about that for decades. We need to move on it. All right. We have lots of opportunity. Successive governments have been working on trade deals. This is great. Government can open the door. The question for everyone in this room is, with the door open, are you going to go through it? It's very nice to say the door's open, we have an agreement. Terrific. It's meaningless unless we go through it. How many of you know that the European free trade, most of the European free trade deal is now in force? We can market to 350 million people in Europe. How many of you know that? How many of you have taken the opportunity to get on a plane to Frankfurt? How many of you have taken the opportunity to look at government contracts in Europe? this is an opportunity for us. So my point to you is, folks, the doors are being open. Get ready to sprint. Get your jogging uniforms on. It's really an opportunity. Now, whether we're going to be successful in the long run at really pursuing these opportunities really depends upon whether we're really competitive. The World Economic Forum does a ranking every year. We are 14th in the ranking. I go to audiences and I say, are you comfortable with that? And people go, sure, that's great. 14th sounds good. There's about 250 countries in the world. Our expectations as a society, excuse me, our expectations as a society are very high. We want opportunity for the next generation. We want to pay for health services and social services. 14th isn't good enough, frankly. Now, in some areas we do well, what are called efficiency enhancers, but I want you to take note of where Canada is in innovation. We are ranked 23rd in the world on innovation. And I don't care whether you feel good about it, you shouldn't. 23rd is not very good. We need to improve there. So the second force, first one was globalization, second one is technology. How are we doing on this? Well, you got an inkling we're not doing so well. One of the things you'll read in the newspapers, you've been reading for decades, is let's look at how productive we are. Well, this is a chart of productivity from 1995 to 2015. What you notice is the U.S.'s average labor productivity is significantly higher than ours. What's the major cause of that? Is it because our labor is not working quickly? Oh, it is. Is it because we're not putting in enough capital? Well, a little bit of that. But there's this gray block on top of that chart for the U.S. It's called multi-factor productivity. That's, by the way, economists speak for it. We don't really know what causes it, but we think we do. Right? And what it is innovation. And this is something that's very important. The Americans, particularly, are taking innovation and they're moving forward with it. How do we do in innovation? Well, innovation isn't one thing. Do we have ideas? And the answer here is we have lots of ideas. Successive governments have funded our universities. We come up with ideas all the time. The problem isn't coming up with the ideas for us. We punch above our weight in producing ideas. We just get very satisfied after we have the idea and don't convert it into products and services. So having an idea is terrific. Doing something with it is even more critical. So if I had to grade us, we get an A or a B on the top end of this in terms of putting applications out there, extending it, building new business, and producing it for the world, we're kind of a D. Now, getting innovation to be successful requires investment. Well, how are we doing on that? If we look at research and development investment, here I'm just comparing this to the U.S., you'll see two lines here. The U.S. has been outperforming us, even during the recession, in which the U.S. was even in worse shape than we were. If we look at machinery and equipment investment, we're not doing well. Around 2008, the U.S. almost came down to our level. Post-2008, when our banks and financial institutions were in the best shape, could we have outpaced them? The answer is yes. What did we do? We held back. We didn't do it. And finally, if we look at software investment, more things are becoming automated. We do particularly badly compared to the U.S. and other countries. Does anyone see opportunity here? I do. Need to invest, need to act on innovation. So that's two of the forces, globalization, innovation. Third is our labor market. So how do we do here? Do we have the talent? Do we have the energy? Do we have the entrepreneurs and the people who are ready to seize and to have the knowledge to seize the day? And the answer here, well, I'll make fun of myself. Did I make my point? We're an aging country, right? Many of us are starting to look like me. By the way, the right-hand picture was, I will have to admit, this is unfair advertising. That was from 5 years ago. But I'm sure you noted that. Thank you for being kind and not laughing immediately. All right? The truth is, we are just beginning the steep end of the wedge of baby boomers leaving the workforce. This is knowledge, capability, leaving the workforce. How are we going to deal with it? What have we got to do? Well, if we want to deal with this, do we have an opportunity? The answer is yes. But we're going to have to deal with the fact that our labor markets are tightening. We don't have all the talent we need. What we're going to have to do is we need to be more successful at bringing not only the right immigrants, but immigrants in general into our country and integrating them in the workforce. We're actually pretty good about getting immigrants in. Where we're not very good is integrating them and taking their talent and really putting it to good use. In addition, we do need to worry about inclusion. Not only worry about it, we need to take advantage of it. We need to work not just socially, but economically to ensure inclusion of everyone in the workforce. And we need to be out there reskilling. So I was excited to see all the different groups that were talking about training, reskilling, education out there. So that's three things that are going to shape our economy. And whether we move out at 2% and can crank it back up to 3% growth. So are we going to compete in the global markets? Are we going to finally get smart about innovation and really crank it up and invest in it? And are we going to be one of the most effective countries in the world at bringing people in and being inclusive, getting them into the workforce, skilling them properly? Another force that's going to affect us is the environment. Look, I was trained as an astrophysicist. That was my I spent high school, I was in physics. In university, I was in physics. I even worked for NASA. Right? Okay, no NASA jokes. Right? I'm a rocket scientist by training. I take the jokes really personally. I don't know how to deal with it, but I've tried to get therapy for it. Interesting thing, folks, we are cooking the planet. The CO2 levels, the greenhouse gas levels are rising. Let's stop debating that. Right? It has implications. I mean, yes, we could say it's not as bad as it was when the dinosaurs were walking the earth. On the other hand, there was no ice when they were walking the earth. All right? We need to worry about it. Nature will survive. We won't. So we do need to act on this. There is going to be environmental regulation. We do have to decrease the CO2 and other greenhouse gas levels. This is not optional. We really do need to get on with that. I know it's a political football in some places, but frankly, whatever the speed we adjust, we're going to have to adjust. And of course, the resource sectors are big, especially the oil and gas, are big GHG emitters. That's the downside. If we look at it, we put in carbon taxes, some of these areas are going to get most impacted. But the really good news is, and we see this at the conference board, is that a lot of the resource sectors are acting on it. One of the things we can do as Canada and Canada's resource sector is actually to embrace this, to lead it, and to change the world, and frankly, sell that knowledge around the world. We can embrace this and help change the world and make money off of it. Not a bad deal when you think about it. I enjoyed the title to one of my colleagues at Harvard's book. He said, "Do lunch or be lunch." It's a choice. Right? I'm saying we do lunch, and it's a real opportunity. So I've talked about 4 factors. I started with the economy is going to be slowing down. We can decide to crank it up. The resource sector is a big chunk of what Canada is involved with, what creates economic value for Canada. How we develop the resource sector is going to be critical. We need to have a common will to do that. We need to have a common will to take our knowledge and capability in developing resources and sell that too. And I'll come back to that. Services are a major growth area, particularly for a knowledge-based economy with 35 million people. Right? Very important. But one of the things we've got to face, and we see it more and more in our surveys and the like, is the fact that we have to start saying, these are the things collectively we're going to do. These are the things we aren't, and get on with it. What we're seeing is the rise of process. Process is not a substitute for results in doing things. I've had many years watching our governance experiment, really, as a nation. What makes us strong? Consultation makes us strong, frankly. We get better collective decisions. And from a governance perspective, we're at the top of the pops in the world. Go to Davos. They all come up to you and go, "Can I touch you?" Because you know how to govern. The problem is, we're not getting the results. We've gone from NIMBY, which you all know, to banana. You know what banana is? Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. The person who said that to me, I immediately looked at him and said, "That's not good, is it?" No, it's not. One of the things we have to do, and all of you are feeling it because we're seeing it in our surveys, is we need to worry about getting through process to the decisions and the actions that are going to have collective results that we can collectively believe in and deal with. This is from one of our regular surveys, and it's government policy that takes the hit here, but it's really process. We get bound up in process. So what factors are adversely affecting the level of your plant capital expenditures? Not the shortage of qualified staff, it's process. We do the survey. We're the partners of the World Economic Forum in Canada, and we do a survey of Canadian executives. The inefficient government bureaucracy became the largest and most problematic factors, according to Canadian executives. These factors are all pointing in the same direction. Process is not generating results. It's not that everything we want to do is the right thing to do or that we can collectively get behind. There's no problem with that. The question is, are we getting to some things that we want to do, that we can collectively agree on in real time? The other message I want to give you is around services. And believe me, I did 5 circuits of this set of rooms. I was very, very interested to see the number of service organizations servicing the resource sector. That's terrific. I asked a couple of people, well, do you have operations outside of Canada? No. Services is one of the fastest growing areas for this economy. We do have engineering services that come out of Canada that we've evolved. We have technical services, geotech services. We need to become even more aggressive at marketing those services. Take every one of those opportunities. You want to move from 2 to 3% growth? That's what it's going to take. Not just exporting the resources, but exporting the know-how to the rest of the world. So what is the bottom line for Canada? Look, the pattern of economic growth that we saw pre-2008 isn't going to continue. China's done with its infrastructure development. It's got a little bit more to do. India may pick up, but frankly, that period is done. The resources driving it is done. Post-2008, we have to worry about a more competitive world, a more globalized market where we need to be more effective. We need to be more effective. And here, I'm not pointing the finger at government. Government enables. You do. You invest. You make decisions on investment. You make decisions on whether you go offshore. You make decisions about whether you take advantage of free trade agreements. Collectively, we have to decide that we want to take advantage of those, capitalize on the technology, use the environmental low-carbon transition as an opportunity. And I'll talk more about that. I'm on a forum on Thursday morning. But the main thing I want to tell you is just what Nike did. Just do it. All right? You need to mobilize. if we're going to move from a 2 to 3% growth economy again. That's the bottom line. So with that, I will take no argument. I thought you'd enjoy that. It's not true. But okay. I thought I'd keep up the illusion. Thank you very much.